Herm, the Owl and the Oath. The moon was a bitter shard of light above the gormwood, no comfort in the cold black hush between the trees. Mist clung to roots and brambles, and every snapping twig seemed to ring out louder than Herm would have liked. Hal was cold again. Herm cupped the owl tighter in the sling he'd fashioned from his own cloak. The bird's pale feathers were clean, but its wing still hung slightly lower than the other, a reminder of the poacher's trap he'd found weeks ago. The rare dusk owl had been near death then. Now it blinked up at him with its huge amber eyes, trusting him far more than Herm trusted the path ahead. "We'll find shelter, Hal. There's supposed to be a lodge before Gorm." "Someplace dry," Herm murmured. He hated the sound of his own voice out here. It felt like a trespass against the deep stillness of the ancient forest. But the silence had begun to feel too complete. That's when the smell hit him. Burned bones and cold iron. He didn't hear the rider at first. He felt him, the way animals do. Even Hal stiffened. Then came the horse's hooves. No, not hooves. The gait was wrong. Measured, deliberate, and oddly soft. From the fog emerged a tall, robed figure, cloaked in glimmering black and silver. His steed was not a horse, but some conjured beast of shadow and muscle, hooved but formless at the edges, like smoke with weight. The knight sat tall, pale hands gloved in silk, helmless, and bearing no banner. Yet Herm did not flee. There was something old in the man's face, old and noble. Tired, but not cruel. Beneath the high collar, his skin glimmered faintly. His mouth was drawn tight and red, but it did not sneer. "You carry a wounded owl," the knight said, voice smooth and gravelled like wind through bone. "The owl is not for eating. Is that your reason?" What?" Herm blinked. "Why you risk the forest tonight? That species hasn't been seen in this wood since the plague of fangs." Herm nodded cautiously. "He's Hal. I found him half dead. I didn't know he was rare." "He is." The knight's eyes, nearly black, moved from the owl to Herm. "You are kind. Too kind to be wandering Gormwood on your own. Turn back." "I'm not leaving him out here," Herm said. "We're going to Gorm. The ranger's watch lodge should be—" The knight dismounted in a fluid motion that defied human muscle. One hand rested on the hilt of an impossibly long blade sheathed in dark wood. That lodge was consumed. Taken by the hollow. Herm drew back slightly, stepping in front of Hal. "Dead things," the knight clarified, not unkindly. "Rot-stuffed men that drink from roots and sleep in the bellies of trees. They took the outpost last moon." "Then, why are you here?" Herm asked, fingers moving instinctively toward his short bow. "I protect Gorm," the knight said simply. "That town doesn't have a protector," Herm countered. "The mayor won't even call for aid. Because he believes the forest eats problems, and because his people believe I do not exist." The knight let the words fall like leaves. "But I am real. As are the things we must kill tonight, ranger in training." Herm hesitated, then said softly, "Who are you?" The knight unsheathed his blade. A silent motion, as if the air parted willingly for it. "I am Lascividios. I once drank blood for joy. Now I bleed monsters for duty." The owl hooted lowly, and Lascividios bowed slightly toward it. "I would not see such a guardian fall. Shall we?" They moved in concert without ceremony, Herm scouting the roots and lower, trail paths. Lascividios gliding behind with deathly stillness. The Gormwood had always been dense, but tonight it felt watching. When the first of the hollow emerged, it was with the wet sound of splitting bark. Herm knocked and loosed an arrow in a single breath. It lodged into a face that looked wrong, its skin like mulch stretched over teeth. It hissed and tumbled, but others pawed behind it. Lascividios didn't draw his blade again. He sang it, spinning through the monsters like a windmill in firelight. His sword arced in crescent motions, his movements more dance than duel. Every strike burned the air with the smell of cut rot. Herm backed him with precision shots, calling out threats with brief whistles and bird-like chirps. Hal stayed behind them on a raised branch, eyes glowing. The fight ebbed and surged. Twice Herm thought it would turn against them, once when a root-trapped creature nearly bit his thigh. But Lascividios was there in a blur, severing it mid-lunge. "You're not just protecting Gorm," Herm said between breaths. "You're watching them, like I'm watching Hal." Lascividios paused, kneeling at the edge of the battlefield, to retrieve a child's necklace from one of the fallen creatures. "They were people," the knight murmured. "Many were from Gorm. I failed them once. Now I keep them from rising again." By dawn, the hollow were ash. The forest was no brighter, but it breathed easier. "You should go," Lascividios said. "They'll return before moon's crest." Herm adjusted Hal's sling. "You coming with me?" The knight shook his head. "I do not enter the town. They'd see me as the curse." "That's stupid," Herm said. "You saved them." "So do you," Lascividios said, glancing at Hal. "Guardianship is not about thanks. It's about necessity. You'll learn that, Ranger." They shook hands. Lascividios's hand was cold but firm. As Herm turned back toward the winding trail to Gorm, Hal blinked once and twisted his head toward the dark, watching. Behind them, the knight vanished into the trees like he'd never been there. The measure of you. The rain had stopped, but the forest still wept. Herm's boots squelched through moss and mud as he hiked the ridge east of Gorm, where the oldest trees were said to grow. Behind him, the slope dropped off toward a quiet valley knotted with fog. Before him, a yew grove waited in solemn silence. These trees were nothing like the green shoots and saplings he was used to trimming near the old hunter trails. These were tall and old, shaped by warping winds and time itself. They curved like frozen dancers, scarred by lightning and beast claw. Their bark was reddish, almost flayed, and the trunks wider than a man's shoulders. He stood beneath them with a kind of reverence. Yew was sacred to the Rangers, not because of ritual, but because of purpose. These trees bled sap that healed wounds and birthed bows that killed clean. Herm walked the grove, counting breaths. He had studied. He knew what to look for. A trunk as tall as his outstretched arms, with heartwood straight and firm. Not too wet. Not too riddled with knot or rot. A tree that wanted to become a bow. He found her on the far end of the grove, half crowned in mist. She leaned just slightly west, her lower branches bare. A dark bird called once from her top. The sound echoed over the trees. Herm set down his pack and knelt. "I'm not here to take," he whispered. "I'm here to shape what you no longer need." With practiced care, he tested the roots, the grain, the lean. He struck low and shallow, cutting not the whole tree but a clean stave, from her living trunk, harvesting the limb rather than felling the body. Painful, but not fatal. A practice the older rangers called kind felling. The yew groaned as the stave peeled free. He bowed his head in silence, pressed 2 fingers to the sap and touched them to his cheek. The next week was all stone and sweat. Back near his lean-to, Herm split pine and ash for arrow shafts. He didn't need finesse shafts anymore. Those were for hunting rabbits. These were for the sky. For things with wings and armored skin. The fletching would wait, but the shafts needed to be denser, broader, and heavier. He stripped bark by firelight, burned smooth the lengths, then tested their spin by letting them roll down the hill. Only those that held their line would do. Arrowheads were more difficult. Herm walked to the river cliffs to find hard stone. There, beneath dripping overhangs, he cracked slate and flint against the bones of the earth until blades sang off stone. He blooded his hands more than once, but the sting felt right. Proper. Ranger work was never clean. He ground the arrowheads on a whetstone and used sinew from his own deer jerkin to bind them. Each one was an act of intention, of range, of reach. Sky threats, his mentor had once called them. Not birds, not bats, but things that hung where trees couldn't reach. Winged shadows that shrieked down with claws and soul hunger. If Herm was going to be a ranger, he couldn't just guard the land. He'd have to guard the air. On the 7th evening, He stood before a makeshift target, a slab of hide nailed to a tree. He drew the bow for the first time. The stave had dried enough to bend, its sinew-backed spine creaking like a drawn breath. The string, braided from horsehair he'd traded in Gorm, held. His new arrows sat in a leather quiver beside him, stone-tipped and brutal. He loosed. The shaft punched through the hide and buried itself into bark so deep he had to saw it free. "Hal's not the only one I'll be protecting now," he said aloud, his breath fogging. The owl, perched nearby in a dead pine, made a single approving hoot. A spark through the leaves. The hive was already dead. Herm knew it before he reached it, before he saw the shattered combs and limp bodies hanging from the tree trunk like ornaments of grief. The scent of beeswax mixed with rot. The stingers were still intact, but their queen was gone, and the soldiers had not even tried to rebuild. Royal jelly, stolen. Hive legacy, ended. Herm crouched near the bark, eyes scanning. No bear tracks, no claw marks. This wasn't the work of hunger. It was cruelty. Damn Nixie. He'd heard the tales from elder rangers, of cruel, laughing spirits no bigger than a frog, who bled voles for music and wove garlands from stolen fur. The Nixies fed not on need, but on disruption. To end a hive was to erase centuries of instinct. A kind of murder, not of body, but of meaning. And they thrived in Gorm's canopy. The light never reached this far. Herm touched the side of the tree gently. "I'll find her," he whispered to the bees. He found the signs just after dusk, a ring of flattened mushrooms, scorched from within, tiny footprints in the moss, shaped like twisted hooves. A trail of dried beetle shells, hollowed out like cups, and the cries of a small animal, half whimpers, half music. The Nixie was just up ahead, crouched in the crook of a hanging vine. She looked like a child made from bones and bark, her wings glistening like oil, her teeth too sharp for her grin. She held a chipmunk by the tail, dipping it again and again into a pool of stinging nettle. "Say you're a queen," she chirped at the creature. "Say you're a queen, or I'll crown you in spiders." The chipmunk squealed. Herm didn't announce himself. He simply raised his bow and knocked one of the stone-tipped sky arrows. "Let her go." The Nixie froze, but didn't seem afraid. Instead, she turned with a delighted shriek, fluttering toward him, trailing smoke and dead leaf smell. "Ooh, a ranger! And so young. Come to kiss the queen of Nettle Court." She vanished mid-air, the way only Fae can, then reappeared to his left, slashing at his neck with a vine blade. Herm ducked, swiped with his bracer, and rolled back toward the clearing. She laughed again, high and cruel, vanishing into shadow. "No sunlight for you down here," she cooed from the dark. "No dawn in Gorm, little tree boy." Herm reached into his satchel and drew out something flat and wrapped in cloth. The Nixie hissed at the motion, suspicious now. "Wanna play a game?" Herm said, standing slowly. "Catch the sun." He unwrapped it, a polished silver mirror, scavenged from a hunter's wrecked signal kit. The kind used to flash codes between distant watchposts. It had survived fire, and now it would carry light. He angled it toward a break in the canopy, a single shaft of sun knifing down through an old break in the trees. Then, with quick muscle memory, he tilted the mirror, catching the beam and throwing it sideways, bouncing it into the brush. The light arced like a lance. It struck the Nixie as she lunged again, and the scream that followed was not a mortal sound. Her wings flared to flame instantly, curling and disintegrating. Her bark-like skin split and smoked, curling at the edges like burned paper. She burst apart in a shower of petals, ash, and brittle bone. Silence returned. Herm lowered the mirror, panting. The chipmunk was gone, escaped in the chaos, hopefully alive. He returned to the hive tree at midnight, placed a small stone carved with a bee into the hollow, and smeared it with pine resin. "For the next queen," he said. Above him, Hal rustled his wings and looked down with solemn gold eyes. Elmroot packed. The man wore a cloak of moss, and silence. For 7 days, Herm had tracked him through the glens and hollows east of Gorm. Careful not to disturb the thorns, careful to never draw breath louder than the insects. The druid moved without pattern, sometimes gathering mushroom spore, other times whispering to willows or weaving tiny crowns of ivy for unseen beasts. Herm wasn't spying to be cruel or clever. It was practice. Training. A ranger needed to move like shadow and listen like stone. And the druid was the perfect quarry, alone, old, and rooted to places no hunter dared tread. But on the 7th day, the game ended. Herm stepped into a hollow near a black elm with the early mist still rising, only to feel the earth move beneath his boots. Roots twisted from the ground and wrapped around his ankles like nooses. Branches drooped like arms. He reached for his knife, but the elm caught his wrist in a wooden vice. The forest itself had turned on him. From behind the trunk stepped the druid, his beard like knotted lichen, eyes pale as bark and just as unreadable. "Boy," he said in a voice like water over stone. "Why do you haunt my steps like a tick?" Herm didn't answer right away. His limbs were tight in the elm's hold, and the pain was starting to spread up his ribs. "I was watching," he admitted. "Training." The druid raised a finger. "Spying." "Learning," Herm insisted. "Learning what?" The man asked. "How to be unseen. How you speak to the land. How it listens to you." The druid blinked slowly, then walked a slow circle around the captured boy. "You think because I live in the trees, I don't know when a sapling leans wrong? You have the quiet of a fox cub, not a ghost." "I'm trying," Herm said through clenched teeth. "I see that. You smell of pine pitch and dirt sweat. You carry a bow that still sings from the shaping. A boy ranger, yes, but with a rhythm forming." The roots loosened slightly, just enough for Herm to breathe. "Tell me your name." "Mine is Venture Oak," the druid said. "I've worn it since men still feared the moon. You may keep your legs. But before I let the tree uncoil, I must ask something in return." Herm nodded stiffly. "I have no kin, no coven, no circle of stone to pass me on. My bones are owed to the grove of drowned stags, but I am old. Failing." The druid sat wearily on a stone. "When my voice leaves me, I need someone to carry my body there. Bury me beneath the rowan with my staff across my chest, and no song but the wind." Herm looked up at him, unsure if this was some trick of old forest magic. "You want me to do that?" "I want someone who watches," Venture Oak said. "You've proven you care enough to follow in silence. That's more loyalty than most blood offers." Herm took a long breath. "All right, swear it." "I swear." The tree shuddered, then released him. He slumped to the ground, heart pounding, limbs aching. Venture Oak stood and handed him a carved totem made from almond tooth. "Keep this. When I die, burn it above my body. It will guide the roots to drink me down." Herm nodded and tucked it away. As the druid vanished once more into the woods, Herm remained kneeling a while longer, not in pain, but in thought. He'd come here to practice vanishing. Instead, he'd been seen, and given a promise that bound him to the deep old forest in a way few rangers ever were. The road to Circle Hollow. Herm tightened the straps on his new boots with practiced hands, but still winced. The hard leather bit his ankles like a dog not yet trained. No give. No softness. These weren't meant for forest floor or silent movement. They were road boots, meant for stone and snow, and the cracked spines of trails that curled through wild, untamed lands. He missed his soft soles already. But the woodland couldn't follow him to the circle, not this time. He squatted beside his pack and double-checked the inventory. Again. He'd done this 4 times now, but repetition was comfort. On this trip, there would be no moss beds or sapwood staves. No dipping a cup into a cold spring and calling it good enough. The ranger circle would judge him not on potential, but on readiness. On completeness. And no candidate arrived with needs unmet. He laid each item on the stone slab beside him. A flint and steel kit, wrapped in waxcloth, older than him, but sharper than the one he'd used in the wet glades. A seal tin of fire shavings, fine as down. A cold seasoned bedroll, stitched with thistle lining and a deer-hide shell, traded dearly for at the southern market. A blackened iron fry pan, light enough to hang from his pack, but thick enough to see a rabbit. A canteen shaped like a flask, heavy and full, not of water but readiness. Each piece was a small defiance against uncertainty. A whispered, "I will not fail." Even Hal had grown quiet, perched on the crossbeam of the old lean-to as if understanding the weight of the moment. "Won't be trees out there to shade us, Hal," Herm murmured, cinching the bedroll beneath his pack. "Wind'll come hard. Roads worse. But they'll be watching, the full circle. No one can object." The Ranger Circle was legend and stone, north of the old salt passes, where fire met frost and the bloodline oaths were made. Each season, 3 were tested, 1 accepted. If you were turned aside, even once, you waited a year or never returned. Herm didn't want a second chance. He wanted now. He stood before the grove one last time. His lean-to, the old moss stump, the training grounds where he'd run with calloused feet, the elm under which Vensharok had bound him. All of it hummed with memory. He left an arrow in the doorframe, its shaft wrapped in green thread, a signal to those who knew that he was gone, but not fallen. Hal flew overhead, a pale blur beneath a rising dawn. Herm squared his shoulders and stepped onto the road, boots clunking with every hard-packed stride. The forest watched him leave, and the circle waited ahead. The trials of Bleak Hollow. The circle was not a hall. It was a hollow, a bowl carved into the stone spine of the high north. Wind howled through its teeth like a wolf denied meat, and the pines above bent in reverent silence. Herm stood shoulder to shoulder with 5 others, each bearing the mark of a different forest, mountain, or plain. They stood before a fire that had no smoke. Its flame burned blue. Elder Rain stepped from the shadow of the standing stones. His hair was long and white, eyes darker than any forest Herm had walked. Around his neck hung a ring of broken arrowheads and claw pendants, trophies not of conquest, but of survival. "This place does not choose," he said. "You do. By breath, by step, by pain. Only 2 shall pass." Herm swallowed hard. His boots still blistered. His pack had grown lighter from the journey, but his bones had grown heavier. 3 trials, Rain continued. The first, silence. Trial 1, silence. They were led into the crooked glen, where even owls dared not roost. The trial was simple: move unseen and unheard from one side of the glen to the other. No trail, no map, just instinct and stillness. Herm counted each breath, watched each footfall. When a thorn snagged his cloak, he untangled it with spider-slow fingers. A hare darted past one of the candidates, Jarek of the Salt Spires, and the boy flinched. Too loud. A branch broke under a boot. Another failure. Only Herm and a broad-shouldered girl named Freda reached the far cairn before dawn. They said nothing. Rangers knew silence meant victory. Trial 2, binding. A wounded beast. A frightened child. An unstable cliff. Each candidate was given a crisis. A situation conjured by the circle to test mind over fear, calm over chaos. Herm's was the child, or rather, the illusion of one, crying on a narrow ledge, with wind and dust and echo, all conspiring to push him wrong. He knelt. Spoke softly. Told a tale of an owl named Hal who once trusted him. Then moved. Crawling. Reaching. Securing. The figure in the cloak turned to a wreath of smoke, once rescued. The judges nodded. Trial 3, the wait. They waited. No instruction. No food. Just a storm cloud above, and a fire pit that stayed cold. One by one, the others lost patience. Jarek wandered off. 2 others begged to restart. Only Herm and Freda remained. Eyes sharp. Bodies still. After a full day, the fire pit lit on its own. Elder Rain returned. "You've passed." The surprise mission. That night, under a moon of ash color, the circle summoned both Herm and Freda to the inner ring. You were meant to be one, said Rain. But we are pressed. He threw a bundle at their feet. Maps, tokens, a snapped arrow. There's a hunting party gone missing in the northeast wilds. Scouts returned raving. One came back without a tongue. The land grows wrong. Find the cause. Bury the dead. Bring back the living. Do this and your elevation will be sealed. Freda looked to Herm. Looks like we're partnered. He nodded, unsure how to speak with someone who moved as quiet as he did. They left that night, packs reloaded. 2 ranger candidates. 1 final test. The hollow would wait. The wilds do not lie. The circle stood silent as Herm returned alone. His boots were torn, spattered black to the knee. His bedroll hung loose at his side. The pan clattered with each broken step. The fingers of his right hand trembled as he laid a blood-stained arrow on the altar stone. Freda's arrow. No one spoke, not even Elder Rain. The blue fire of the hollow burned lower than usual, casting long shadows behind the old stones. Herm's breath steamed in the cold. She fought to the end, he said, then passed it. He placed a small pouch beside the arrow. Teeth. Scaled, iridescent teeth, notched like bone saws. They weren't wolves, he added. The wilds. They had left on moonless night, the last stars barely shining through the mist. The northeast wilds were worse than the maps warned. No bird calls, no dawn song. Just buzzing. Just roots too soft, trees too smooth. As if they had grown too fast, too wrong. The first corpse they found was crucified on a tree, upside down, the tongue nailed beside it. Freda had spat. This is no beast. Herm had agreed, but said nothing. He kept Hal, the owl, tucked in his pack. Deeper in, the land began to hum. Trees leaned closer. Bark dripped with sap that hissed on contact. One night, the fire refused to light at all. They began hearing music. Not flutes. Not song. Just melody, like wind through hollow ribs. The final stand. It was near the green sink, where water had once been, but now boiled in silence, that the thing attacked. It had a woman's face, old and starved, stretched like fabric. Its limbs were root and vine. Its breath smelled of honeycomb and rot. A gift. For my hive. It had crooned. Herm had fired, but the arrow passed through mist. Freda rushed it, blade drawn, her scream the only honest sound in the wilds. It caught her, tangled her legs in amber-glossed silk. She drove her dagger deep into its eye, but it only laughed. Freda shouted once more, then never again. Herm lit his oilcloth and pressed it to his silver plate, his only reflective item. The sun caught the glint, the fire danced, and the creature burned. The woods screamed with it. Back in the circle. She made me swear not to leave her for them, Herm whispered. Elder Rain stepped forward and placed a hand on the arrow. Then you kept the vow. Herm nodded, but did not meet his gaze. She was better than me, he said. She should have returned. No, Rain replied. You did. That's what matters. The circle bowed as one. Ranger Herm was blooded that day, not by his own wounds, but by the weight of Freda's. The wilds had lied to no one.